Mary Wilson was born on a ship crossing the Atlantic in 1720, and the pirate captain who had just raided the vessel agreed to spare the passengers on one condition: that the newborn be named after his mother, Mary. He left a bolt of green brocade silk as a gift. The girl grew up in New Hampshire, outlived her husband, and died in Henniker in 1814 at the age of 94. Since then, a woman in colonial dress has been seen near the road in Henniker. A woman named Eunice Cole was accused of witchcraft in Hampton in 1656, arrested, imprisoned, and died alone in poverty, buried face down, as was the custom for the community's most feared dead. The town of Hampton cleared her name in 1938. When the fog rolls in from the sea at Hampton Beach, visitors have seen her walking around. These are 30 ghost legends in New Hampshire. Number 1. Charlie the Helpful Handyman. Meredith, New Hampshire, 1763. The old Eliphalet Rawlings homestead rose on quiet land. Over the years it became many things, and today it is known as the Nutmeg Inn. The beams, floors, and garden paths still carry that early New England feeling. Guests come for peace, but some say one helper never checked out. The spirit is called Charlie, and he is not the kind of ghost who slams doors just to scare people. His legend is softer. Innkeepers have blamed him for finding missing objects, nudging small repairs along, and seeming to help with chores when the house feels too busy. In a place built before America was even a country, that friendly work feels almost natural. Stories say Charlie may have been tied to the old property when it was still a home, farm, or busy stop for travelers. No one knows his full name, and that missing record makes him feel more real, not less. Old houses often remember people who fixed loose boards, carried firewood, and kept rooms warm through long New Hampshire winters. Charlie feels like one of them. So the mystery at the Nutmeg Inn is not dark. It is the strange comfort of a house that seems cared for from the other side. A lost key appears. A creak answers from an empty hall. A stubborn flower finally blooms by the porch. And when the night gets quiet in Meredith, Charlie's legend feels like a hand still working in the walls again. Number 2. Ocean-born Mary. The Atlantic Ocean, 1720. A baby girl was born aboard an immigrant ship before her family reached the New World. Her name became Mary Wilson, later Mary Wallace, but New England called her Ocean-born Mary. Legend says a pirate captain stopped the vessel and spared everyone when the baby was named Mary, after his mother. From the start, her life sounded like legend. Mary grew up in New Hampshire, married James Wallace in 1742, and lived long enough to see her family spread through the hills around Londonderry and Henniker. Records place her death in 1814, in her 90s. People described her as tall, red-haired, sharp-minded, and hard to frighten. Those details helped the ghost story grow real roots. The famous haunting is tied to Henniker, though historians warn that some pirate treasure parts were likely shaped much later by owners of the old Wallace house. That makes the tale even more interesting. It is partly history, partly showmanship, and partly the kind of story a town keeps, because it feels too good to lose. Mary became larger than any one house. Today, people still speak of a tall woman in colonial dress, a flash of red hair near the road, and the smell of roses passing through still air. Maybe it is only memory, dressed in old fabric. Maybe it is a motherly spirit guarding a story born at sea. Either way, ocean-born Mary still feels like New Hampshire folklore opening the door again. Number 3. Joshua Card. Newcastle Island, 1874. Joshua Kenny Card became keeper of Portsmouth Harbor Light, watching the Piscataqua River where tides, fog, and ships could turn dangerous fast. He had already served at lonely Boone Island Light, so he knew what a keeper's life required. Lamps had to be tended, lenses cleaned, storms watched, and the harbor could not be left in darkness. Card stayed at Portsmouth Harbor until 1909, a service so long that people later called him one of the oldest lighthouse keepers in the country when he retired. For more than 3 decades, his days followed the rhythm of the sea. When fog rolled in, the light mattered. When ships came home, that beacon was more than a tower. It was a promise. The ghost story says Captain Card never fully gave up his rounds. Visitors and volunteers have told of footsteps on stairs, shadows near the lantern room, and a voice where no person should be. In a lighthouse, those details land differently. Every sound climbs the iron steps. Every draft feels like a breath, and every night watch seems to belong to someone. It is not about a spirit trying to frighten the coast. It is about duty lasting longer than life. The harbor light still faces the dark water, steady and watchful. And when the wind moves through Newcastle after sunset, it is easy to imagine that keeper checking the beam one more time. Number 4. Sister Marguerite. Canterbury, New Hampshire. The Shaker village was built on order, work, and faith. Men and women lived simply, shared labor, and believed daily tasks could become sacred. In workshops, barns, kitchens, and meeting rooms, every tool had a place. That is why Sister Marguerite's stories feel so Shaker, even now. Marguerite Frost joined the Canterbury Shakers as a child and spent more than 60 years in the community. She taught, served, and later helped lead as the village changed around her. By the 20th century, fewer Shakers remained, but the old buildings still held the rhythm of sweeping floors, folding cloth, making food, and keeping everything neat. Her life was tied to that order. After her death, people began to speak of small but stubborn signs. Clamps, looms, and heavy wooden items were said to shift inside locked rooms. A butter churn might appear carefully placed in the center of a workroom, as if someone was correcting the display. Nothing felt wild. It felt exact, quiet, and almost polite, like a sister still finishing her chores. The mystery of Sister Marguerite is gentle. Canterbury does not need chains rattling in the night. It has clean wooden floors, pale walls, and rooms where silence feels busy. If something moves after dark, the story says it may not be mischief. It may be Marguerite keeping the old order alive. Number 5. Chief Passaconaway. Before Rhodes climbed the White Mountains, Passaconaway was remembered as a great Pennacook leader of the Merrimack Valley. In the 1600s, he was a sachem and diplomat, guiding his people through changing alliances, English settlements, and old rivalries. His name stayed powerful because he was more than a warrior, he was a peacemaker. Folklore gave him a final journey worthy of the mountains. When Passaconaway was very old, a sled drawn by wolves came for him. Wrapped in skins, he crossed frozen lakes and dark valleys toward Agiokachuk, the great mountain now called Mount Washington. There the sled rose in fire and light, carrying him into the sky like a spirit returning home. Historians know the story changed as it passed through English writers, travelers, and local memory. Some details may have been added later, and some may mix older native beliefs with White Mountain legend. But the heart of the tale remains clear. The highest peak became a place of honor, and Passaconaway became part of the landscape itself. The mountain kept his name alive. That is why his legend still feels different from an ordinary ghost story. It is not a haunted room or a knocking sound. It is a whole mountain holding a memory. When clouds cover Mount Washington and the wind runs hard over the rocks, people can still imagine wolf tracks crossing the snow, climbing higher and higher until they disappear into stars. Number 6. Carolyn Stickney. Bretton Woods, 1902. The Mount Washington Hotel opened like a palace at the foot of the White Mountains. Railroad man Joseph Stickney built it with grand halls, bright verandas, and views of Mount Washington. His wife, Carolyn Foster Stickney, helped shape its elegant life, and guests arrived in fine clothes for long summer stays. After Joseph died, Carolyn later married a French nobleman and became known as a princess. Yet her name stayed tied to the hotel. Room 314, once connected to her private spaces, became the heart of the legend. Guests speak of a woman in Victorian dress, light taps on doors, missing things that return, and a soft perfume in the air. The story works because Carolyn belonged to that world of polished floors, dinner bells, and mountain air. She knew the hotel when it was young, when steam trains brought visitors to Bretton Woods, and the resort stood as a symbol of luxury in northern New Hampshire. Decades later, in 1944, world leaders met there for the Bretton Woods Conference, giving the place another famous chapter. If any spirit would still glide through those halls, people say it would be hers. So the haunting is not a scream in the dark. It is quieter than that. A brush of scent, a figure at the edge of a bed, a door touched by no hand. Number 7. Eunice Cole. Hampton, New Hampshire, 1640s. Eunice Cole lived in a small Puritan town where fear could become law. She and her husband, William, had come north from Massachusetts, but peace never lasted. Neighbors called her difficult, courts punished her for quarrels, and by 1656 the word witch was placed on her like a heavy stone. At her first witchcraft trial in Boston, 26 witnesses spoke against her. They blamed her for dead cattle, illness, and strange knowledge of private things. She was whipped and imprisoned, then released years later only because Hampton grew tired of paying her jail costs. Old and poor, she came home to a town that still treated her like danger. The accusations followed her into the 1670s and 1680. She was tried again, held in prison, and died not long after her last arrest. Later stories claimed her body was buried with a stake and horseshoe to keep her from rising. In 1938, Hampton finally voted to clear her name and restore her place as a citizen, almost 3 centuries too late. That is why Goody Cole's ghost feels more sad than scary. People say a gray figure still walks near Hampton Beach and Island Path, but the real haunting is history itself. A lonely woman was turned into a warning by fear, then into a legend by memory. Number 8. Laura, the Tilton Inn. Tilton, New Hampshire, 1875. The original inn opened in the busy heart of town, close to the mills, roads, and rail lines that brought visitors through the lakes region. Over time, the building became part hotel, part tavern, and part local landmark. Famous names like Thomas Edison and Henry Ford are said to have passed through its rooms. But the inn's history also carries fire. The building burned more than once, and one old story says a 12-year-old girl named Laura died in one of those blazes. Her family was connected to the inn in the 1800s, in the room now remembered by many guests as the Sanborn Room. That small detail gives the legend a home. It is gentle, but it still changes the room when the lights flicker. Laura is not described as cruel or frightening. She feels more like a child who stayed close to the place she knew. People speak of footsteps in empty halls, small objects moving, and water glasses tipping in the dining room. Sometimes the feeling is not terror at all, but the quick sense that someone young has just run past. That is what makes Laura's story linger in Tilton. The inn still serves travelers, meals, and warm lights on Main Street, while her legend moves quietly between the upstairs rooms and the pub below. Maybe every old building keeps echoes. Maybe Laura is only a memory of fire and childhood. But when a glass shifts by itself, the room seems to hold its breath. Number 9. Blackbeard's Wife. Isles of Shoals, early 1700s. The rocks off the New Hampshire coast were lonely, useful, and dangerous. Fishing boats, traders, and smugglers knew the islands well, and that made them perfect ground for pirate rumors. The most famous name attached to them is Blackbeard, the feared Edward Teach, though historians have never proved he hid treasure there. The legend says he sailed to the shoals, buried riches near Star Island or Lunging Island, and left one of his wives to guard it until he returned. Some tellers call her his 13th bride. Others give her no true name at all. She waded in sea wind, wrapped in dark cloth or white fabric, watching the horizon for a sail that never came. In real history, Blackbeard died in 1718 after a brutal fight near Ocracoke, far to the south in North Carolina waters. That makes the Shoals story feel even colder. If his bride was waiting, she was waiting for a man already gone. Local writers have admitted the tale is better folklore than proof. but that has never stopped people from repeating it. So her ghost remains one of the saddest figures on the islands. Visitors imagine a tall woman on the cliffs, hair blowing in salt air, whispering that he will come back. The treasure may be only rumor. The pirate may never have stood there, but the image of a bride left alone beside the Atlantic still feels true in the way legends often do. It clings to those rocks. Number 10. Madame Sherry. Chesterfield, New Hampshire, 1929. Antoinette Brumaire, better known as Madame Sherry, bought forest land on Gulf Road and began building a strange dream in the woods. She had come from France, worked in New York as a theatrical costume designer, and helped dress the bright world of Broadway. In quiet New Hampshire, she wanted a stage of her own. Her castle was never a medieval fortress. It was a wild party house, part French chalet and part Roman ruin, with a stone stairway climbing to her private rooms. Actors, dancers, and city friends came for music, laughter, and late nights under the trees. Locals watched her arrive in style, wrapped in glamour that seemed too big for a country road. Then the lights went out slowly, money faded, the parties ended. When Madame Sherry returned in 1959, vandals had damaged the house she once filled with guests. A fire destroyed it in the early 1960s, leaving foundation stones, chimneys, and the famous staircase behind. She died in 1965, far from the applause that had shaped her life. Today, the forest has taken back the castle, but not the story. Even now, the 513-acre forest still carries her name. Hikers still find the stairs rising into open air like a scene waiting for actors. Number 11. Able Blood. Hollis, New Hampshire, 1867. Able Blood was laid to rest in Pine Hill Cemetery, a quiet burial ground that later earned the nickname Blood Cemetery because of his family name. The place itself is old and wooded, with leaning stones, narrow lanes, and the kind of silence that makes even a bird call feel sudden. In daylight, it can look peaceful. Abel's marker became famous because of one carved detail, a hand with one finger pointing upward, a common Victorian symbol of the soul rising toward heaven. But local legend says the hand does not stay that way. By night, people claim the finger points down instead, as if the stone has changed its mind about where Abel went. The story grew with other reports around the cemetery. Some visitors told of soft tapping near the graves, pale lights drifting between stones, or the strange feeling of being watched from the road. Skeptics say shadows, old carvings, and teenage dares did the work. The headstone was later damaged by vandals, which only made the legend feel more unfinished and harder to check. It is one small symbol on one old stone, but it asks a question that feels bigger than the cemetery. Did the carving only fool the eye in moonlight, or did something in Hollis truly turn the hand downward after dark? The woods give no answer. They just stand there. Few leave without looking back. Number 12. Hannah Hill. Durham, New Hampshire, 1649. Valentine Hill built a homestead near the Oyster River, where sawmills, timber, and river traffic helped shape the young settlement. The house survived wars, changing owners, and long centuries of New England weather. Today it stands as Three Chimneys Inn, one of the oldest homes in the state. Its age is part of the spell. The spirit most often named there is Hannah Hill, remembered in legend as Valentine's daughter. The story says she drowned in the Oyster River and that her sadness never fully left the house. Guests do not describe her as cruel. They speak instead of a playful presence that touches doors, moves glasses, and seems curious about modern machines. That detail fits the place. Three Chimneys carries many layers. Colonial trade, the 1694 raid on Oyster River, later additions, gardens, wells, and a long life before it became an inn. A house that old is not just wood and stone. It is work, family, danger, and memory pressed together until every hallway seems to listen closely. So Hannah's haunting feels like a small voice inside a very old building. A glass drops without breaking. A woman feels a gentle touch at her hair and turns to an empty room. Maybe it is only the house settling. But at Three Chimneys Inn, the past has had more than 3 centuries to learn how to speak, and that quiet makes the tale feel close now. Number 13. The Phantom Cat. Fitzwilliam, New Hampshire, 1837. The Amos J. Blake House was built as a store with living quarters attached, a practical place for business, family, and town life. Amos Blake later became a respected local lawyer, official, and state legislator. Today the building serves as a museum, but its quiet rooms carry stranger stories too. The shelves seem to watch. Among the reported spirits is not a person at all, but a phantom cat. Volunteers and visitors have spoken of soft meows in empty rooms, the brush of fur against an ankle, and a small shadow slipping near furniture before vanishing. In a museum full of old objects, that tiny sound can feel louder than a scream. For a moment, even grown visitors wonder if an unseen pet has chosen them. Quiet. The cat's legend shares the house with other tales. A young boy named Bobby, a stern older presence, doors that move, chains that shift, and toys found scattered after being set in place. Paranormal teams have visited, but the best stories still come from people who expected nothing and then felt something small and living pass by. That is why the phantom cat is so memorable. It is not a grand ghost on a staircase or a face in a window. It is a quick touch, a little cry, a shape at floor level, gone before the mind can argue. In the Amos Blake house, history does not only stand behind glass. Sometimes people say it rubs against your ankles in the dark. Number 14. Nancy Barton. Crawford Notch, 1778. 16-year-old Nancy Barton worked in Jefferson, New Hampshire, and believed she was about to marry a man named Jim. According to the old tale, she trusted him with her savings, hoping they would build a life together in Portsmouth. Instead, he left with her money and disappeared into winter. The betrayal moved fast. Nancy would not wait by the fire. She set out on foot through the White Mountains, following a rough, snowy trail for miles. Neighbors warned her to turn back, but heartbreak and anger kept her moving. The cold grew sharper, the path grew harder, and near a brook in Crawford Notch, her strength finally failed. Searchers later found her frozen beside the water. That brook, nearby falls, and even Nancy Pond and Nancy Mountain helped keep her name alive. At the Notchland Inn in Hart's location, her story is remembered with a marker, and guests have reported mirror writing, odd sounds, and a presence that feels more lonely than dangerous. Nancy Barton's legend hurts because it begins with a very human mistake, trusting the wrong person. The mountains did not hate her. They simply did what mountains do in winter. When wind moves through the notch, people still imagine a girl calling across snow, not to scare the living, but to make sure no one forgets how far she walked. That is why her name still sounds personal in the cold air of Crawford Notch. Number 15. The Ghost Ship Isidore. Off the New England coast, 1842. The Isidore sailed from Kennebunkport with a load of lumber bound for New Orleans. Some versions say crewmen had warned of dark dreams before the voyage, but the ship went out anyway. By Thanksgiving night, wind and snow had turned the seas rough, and the coast became a wall of danger. Every mile mattered. The storm drove the vessel toward the rocks near Cape Nettic and Bald Head Cliff, close to the border waters known to New Hampshire sailors too. The Isidore broke apart in the gale, and many aboard were lost. Wreckage and bodies later washed ashore, turning a hard maritime accident into one of the coast's most repeated ghost ship stories. The legend says the Isidore did not sink quietly into the past. Fishermen and shore watchers later claimed to see a pale ship moving through fog, its sails dim, and its shape wrong against the water. Some said it appeared before storms, as if the wreck had become a warning sent back from the rocks. It is a true wreck wrapped in omen, fear, and salt air. The ocean can destroy a ship in one night, then spend generations returning its shadow. When fog hangs low near the Isles of Shoals and the horizon turns white, people still look twice, wondering if the Isidore is sailing home again. That warning keeps the old story sailing long after the wreckage vanished at sea. Number 16. George the Prankster. Concord, New Hampshire. The building at 1 Bicentennial Square did not begin with tacos, bright signs, or families at dinner. From 1890 to 1975, it served as the city police station, with real jail cells built into its stone heart. Today, Margarita's Mexican restaurant uses those cells for tables, but the old walls still remember keys and uneasy nights. The spirit there is known as George, and his favorite trick is not to frighten people badly. Staff have blamed him for sliding glasses, moving furniture, hiding things, and tossing small bits of food when the room should be still. Because the restaurant kept the jail cells, every prank feels tied to the building's older life, as if someone never accepted the change. One local story even connects the site to the 1945 capture of Edgar Cook and John Giles, the so-called toothbrush bandits who had escaped an Iowa jail with a homemade key before their run ended in Concord. Whether George was ever a prisoner, an officer, or only a name given to strange activity, the setting makes the legend easy to believe. A place once built for locked doors now serves birthday dinners and warm plates, but every so often the past seems to reach across the table. A chair scrapes, a drink shifts, someone laughs, then checks the empty cell beside them. In Concord, George keeps the old jail from becoming just a restaurant. Number 17, Princess Saco. Bretton Woods, New Hampshire, the Mount Washington Hotel, opened in 1902 beneath the high, cold face of the White Mountains. Most guests know the famous ghost of Carolyn Stickney, but another legend is sometimes whispered in the halls. It is the tale of Princess Saco, a woman said to belong to an older world of rivers and mountain spirits. Her story is not recorded like a deed or hotel bill. It lives as folklore, and that matters. Some versions call her a native princess betrayed by the man she loved. In her sorrow, she cursed the land, binding her grief to the valley before the great resort stood there. Later tellers placed her spirit among the polished rooms where she appears in a white wedding dress. The name Saco itself belongs to the region's landscape, flowing through the White Mountains and into old stories long before luxury travelers arrived. That makes the legend feel less like a hotel tale and more like a memory beneath it. Visitors may see chandeliers and red roofs, but outside are dark ridges, winter winds, and trails where older stories could hide. So Princess Saco is best understood as a mountain legend wearing a ghostly shape. Maybe she is not a proven person from history. Maybe she is the way the land reminds visitors that it had a soul before railroads and grand hotels. When the resort windows glow at night, people still imagine a white figure crossing the hall. Number 18, Elizabeth Pierce. Portsmouth, New Hampshire, 1717. Elizabeth Hall. Pierce was buried in the Point of Graves burial ground, one of the oldest cemeteries in the city. Her stone says she was the wife of Joshua Pierce and died in the 42nd year of her age. Around her rest merchants, sea captains, families, and children from a port town shaped by ships and hard winters. The burial ground itself dates to the late 1600s, near the Piscataqua River and old waterfront streets. It is small, but it feels crowded with history. Slate stones lean in rows, carved with skulls, wings, and warnings from a time when death was part of daily speech. At night, those old symbols can look almost alive under a street lamp. Elizabeth became the cemetery's best-known gentle spirit. Visitors have reported footsteps behind them, a soft touch, or even a light push near her grave, as if someone wants them to turn back and notice. Some local ghost tellers say she does not mean harm. She only wants to be remembered among the many names fading from the stones. Elizabeth Pierce was not a queen or a famous soldier. She was a woman from early Portsmouth, and her marker still asks the living to pause. When the town noise falls away and the river air slips through the burial ground, that unseen push feels less like fear and more like a request. Do not pass by too quickly. Stop, read, remember at dusk. Number 19. Mr. Sprague. Chesterfield, New Hampshire, 1891. Winter had sealed Lily Pond in Pisgah's deep woods with ice. Lafayette Sprague, a Civil War veteran remembered in local stories as Mr. Sprague, went out near the pond during the cold season and never returned to ordinary life. The tale says the ice gave way, and the water took him before help could save him. The cold pond keeps the old accident close in town memory. Pisgah State Park now covers miles of forest, wetlands, old roads, and quiet ponds. But the land was once farms, mills, pastures, and homesteads. That history makes the place feel lived in, even when no house is left standing. On a gray day, Lily Pond can look so still that every ripple feels like a message from below the surface. Hikers have long told of a man across the water wearing a blue Union uniform, the kind a Grand Army of the Republic veteran might wear in memory of the war. He does not call out. He does not wave. He simply sits or stands with a fishing line, peaceful and distant, as if eternity gave him back the hobby he loved. That is why Mr. Sprague's ghost does not feel cruel. His story is about a man lost to cold water, then seen again doing something calm beside it. Maybe the figure is mist, a stump, or the mind turning history into a shape. But when the far shore darkens and the pond goes quiet, people still look for a blue coat that should not be there, waiting beside the water. Number 20. The Orphan Girl. Portsmouth, New Hampshire, 1762. The Chase House was built for merchant Stephen Chase, and later became one of the grand Georgian homes now preserved at Strawberry Bank. It stood through the Revolution, the Age of Sail, and the slow changes of the old waterfront neighborhood, but its ghost story belongs to a later chapter, when the house served children. In 1881, after the Chase family era ended, the building was given new life as the Chase Home for Children. It cared for young people who had lost parents or needed help in a hard port city. In 1893, records point to a diphtheria outbreak there. 9 children were sick, and a young girl named Carr reportedly died, a small notice for a very sad life. Because of that history, the haunting is often told carefully now. Older rumors claimed a darker death in an upstairs room, but the known record points to illness, not spectacle. Visitors still speak of a young presence, doors locking and unlocking, lights acting strangely, and the feeling that a child is close by, curious about other children who pass through. The Orphan Girl is not a monster story. It is a reminder of how many small lives pass through old houses without leaving much on paper. In the Chase House, polished rooms and museum labels can only tell part of the past. The rest arrives as a click of a door, a flicker of light, and the sense that one little girl still wants to be seen today. Number 21. General Jonathan Moulton. Hampton, New Hampshire, 1726. Jonathan Moulton was born into a seacoast town that measured wealth in land, ships, and influence. He rose from a local trader to a militia officer served in colonial wars, and later became one of Hampton's most powerful men. By the 1760s, his success was so great that neighbors searched for an explanation. In a small town, a fortune was never quiet. Folklore answered. It said Moulton made a bargain with the devil. Every month his boots would be filled with gold. But the general was clever. He cut the soles from the boots and placed them over a hole in the floor so the coins fell into the cellar below. Each visit made him richer, and each trick made the devil angry in silence. In 1769, Moulton's mansion burned, and the story claimed that fire was revenge. History records the blaze. Folklore added the flames of judgment. Moulton rebuilt, kept his public standing, and died in 1787. Yet even his grave became uncertain in local memory, as if Hampton could never quite decide where the general truly rested. The story stayed close to the ashes. People imagine heavy military boots crossing wooden floors after dark, pacing like a man counting gold he can never spend. Maybe the story grew from envy of wealth. Maybe it was a warning about greed. But in Hampton, Jonathan Moulton still walks between history, rumor, and fire. Number 22, Abigail Moulton. Hampton, New Hampshire, 1775. Abigail Moulton, the first wife of General Jonathan Moulton, died after 26 years of marriage. Some accounts say smallpox carried her away inside the great house he had rebuilt after the 1769 fire. In a town full of rumors about his gold, her death gave people another story to whisper. Her name stayed tied to the old house. Soon after, Jonathan married Sarah Emery, who had helped nurse Abigail during her illness. The remarriage may have been ordinary by 18th century standards, but Hampton folklore made it feel uneasy. The tale says Jonathan gave Abigail's ring and bracelets to his new bride, as if the past could be moved from one wrist to another. Then came the famous ghostly visit, later preserved by John Greenleaf Whittier in The New Wife and the Old. On the wedding night, Abigail's spirit was said to enter the chamber cold and quiet. She reached for the jewelry, removed it from Sarah's hand and arm, and took back what had belonged to her in life. The poem made local rumor feel almost formal. It is a story about memory refusing to be replaced. The mansion, the second wife, the old jewels, and the frozen touch all turn grief into a warning. In Hampton, people still imagine Abigail stepping from the dark, not to harm the living, but to claim the one part of herself that no one had the right to give away. Number 23, The Lady in White. Durham, New Hampshire, 1908. Smith Hall opened at what is now the University of New Hampshire as the campus's first dormitory built for women. Before that, many female students had to find rooms away from campus or commute from home. The building was not meant to be spooky. It was meant to give young women a safer place to study and sleep. That history is why the Lady in White feels connected to Smith Hall. For generations, students had told stories of a pale woman moving through the dorm at night, appearing in halls, vanishing near stairways, or checking on rooms while students sleep. Some versions also place her near Tea Hall, where old campus paths make the night feel long. The halls listened. UNH archivists have noted that the legend is old, but not fixed. Some students say the woman lived in Smith between the 1920s and 1940s. Others tell it as a guardian story, not a tragedy. The details change because college ghost stories travel by whispers, late-night walks, and nervous laughter after lights go out. Each class leaves its own version behind. That is what makes The Lady in White last. She belongs to a campus where real history and student memory overlap. A building made to protect women became home to a figure who still seems to watch over them. When footsteps cross an empty hall after midnight, students do not always run. Sometimes they listen, wondering if she is only making sure they are safe. Number 24, Mary the Innkeeper. Cornish, New Hampshire. The Smith Hill Inn sits in a quiet corner of the Connecticut River Valley, where old roads, farms, and stone walls make the past feel close. Its roots are usually traced back to the 1700s, when inns and taverns were not just places to sleep. They were newsrooms, shelters, and warm stops between hard miles. Cornish later drew artists and summer guests. The ghost most often named there is Mary, remembered as a former innkeeper or owner. Local legend says she knew herbs, household cures, and old folk practices that later visitors turned into talk of witchcraft. That word sounds frightening now, but in many rural communities it often meant a woman who understood plants, weather, and pain. Mary's signs are said to be gentle. Guests have reported the scent of lavender drifting through rooms when no flowers are near, soft movements in empty spaces, and the feeling of being watched without fear. Unlike darker tales, this one feels tied to hospitality. Even as a ghost, Mary seems to keep the house calm. The scent is gentle, but it stays with people. Buildings like Smith Hill held travelers when roads were rough and winters were long. A good innkeeper had to notice everything: the fire, the food, the tired stranger at the door. If Mary still lingers, the legend says she is not there to frighten anyone. She is simply keeping her rooms ready. Number 25, Bobby the Boy. Fitzwilliam, New Hampshire, 1837. The Amos J. Blake House was built as a store with living quarters attached, the kind of place where business and family life shared the same floors. Amos Blake purchased it in 1865, practiced law there, served his town, and became a figure in the Monadnock region. Today, it is a museum. Its clapboard walls still face the common. Inside those rooms, visitors come for history, but many leave talking about Bobby. He is the boy spirit often reported in the house, playful rather than frightening. People have told of toys moving by themselves, flashlights turning on, chains shifting, and the quick sense of a child watching from near the floor or a doorway. The air can feel oddly sweet. The legend sits beside other Blake House stories, including a phantom cat and older presences tied to the building's long life. That makes Bobby feel less like a single jump scare and more like part of a crowded memory. A 19th century house held births, work, illness, errands, family worries, and small moments that never made it into books. He does not roar through the museum. He plays. A toy changes place. A light flickers. A visitor hears something small and turns too late. In a house built for everyday life, the haunting feels every day too. Bobby reminds people that history was not only made by adults. Children left echoes in old rooms as well. Number 26. The Ghost Ship, William Tell. Hampton Beach, New Hampshire, 1921. The William Tell was a coastal coal vessel working the old New England trade. Before oil and electricity changed daily life, coal warmed homes, shops, and boarding houses through hard winters. When the ship went down near Hampton, the wreck was real, and locals later remembered pieces of fuel washing ashore. The ghost story came later in 1938, during Hampton's 300th anniversary parade. Floats rolled through town to honor local history, but photographs seem to show one strange entry no official had registered. It looked like a ship on a flatbed, drawn by horses, and people began to say the William Tell had returned for the celebration. That detail makes the legend unusual. This was not a ghost seen in fog at sea, but a phantom vessel appearing on land, in the middle of public parade. Maybe someone forgot paperwork. Maybe a float was misidentified years later. Or maybe Hampton's old wreck found a playful way to sail one more time before the town. The wreck belonged to a practical world of cargo, cold weather, and working boats. The ghost belongs to the town that kept telling the story. When Hampton Beach turns gray and the tide pulls back, people can still imagine a coal ship waiting just beyond the edge of ordinary history, its silent deck riding the shore mist again at dawn. Number 27. The Blue Lady. Wilton, New Hampshire. Vale End Cemetery began as an old burying ground in the 1700s, when the town was still young and families marked graves with simple stones. Later expanded and renamed in the 1800s, it became a place where Revolutionary War veterans, early settlers, children, and local families rested under tall trees and quiet paths. The grave most often linked to legend belongs to Mary Ritter Spalding. She died in 1808 at only 35 years old, after having 7 children in about 10 years. Her husband, Captain Isaac Spalding, later remarried, and the two Marys were buried in the same family plot. That small human detail gives the story a sorrowful edge. People call her the Blue Lady. Some say she appears as a blue glow rising from the ground, shaped almost like a person. Others describe a woman in old-fashioned dress moving between the stones. Local tellers also remember Mary as kind, church-going, and skilled with herbs, which may be why her spirit feels more watchful than wicked. That is the strange beauty of Vale End Cemetery. It holds real names, real dates, and real grief. But at night, the story turns blue. Maybe the light is mist, moonshine, or the mind trying to give shape to sadness. Still, visitors look toward Mary's grave and lower their voices. In Wilton, the Blue Lady is not just a ghost. She is a memory that learned to glow, soft and lonely, after the gates go still. Number 28. Susanna Smith. Hampton, New Hampshire, 1680. Susanna Smith died in a way so sudden that her grave kept the shock in stone. Old records place her in Pine Grove Cemetery, wife of Robert Smith, an early settler connected to Exeter and Hampton. Her marker carried a hard old phrase, often remembered as slain with thunder. That meant lightning, or thunder in the language of the time, had taken her life. In the 1600s, such a death did not feel ordinary. Puritan New England watched the sky for signs, and storms could be read as warnings from God, nature, or both. Susanna's grave became more than a family marker. It became a strange lesson cut into stone. Over the years, coastal sand and soil seemed to play with the grave. Stories say the marker disappeared beneath the earth, then returned when weather shifted and the ground opened again. That simple movement made people talk. A woman killed by the sky now seemed hidden and revealed by the land itself, as if storm and cemetery were still speaking. That is why Susanna Smith's legend feels so old and bare. There is no white figure in a window, no long speech from the dead. There is only a date, a storm, and a stone that people say would not stay put. At Pine Grove Cemetery, the past feels as if it rises and sinks with the dirt. And when thunder rolls over Hampton, her name still feels carved into the weather, waiting beneath every flash of light in the darker ground. Number 29. The Mountain Spirit Girl. Pinkham Notch, New Hampshire, Glen Ellis Falls. Drops through the White Mountain Forest near Mount Washington, where the Ellis River plunges into a cold pool below. Long before tourists parked beside Route 16, the ravines, cliffs, and streams carried older stories. One of the gentlest tells of a girl who vanished into the mountain. In the legend, an indigenous family lived near Tuckerman Ravine. One day, the girl went out among berries, rocks, and spruce, then did not return. Her parents searched the rough ground and listened near the water, but the mountain gave back no footprint, no torn cloth, and no answer. The child seemed to have stepped beyond the human trail. Later, hunters saw her near Glen Ellis Falls beside a tall, shining mountain spirit. She was not crying. She looked peaceful, as if the wild place had claimed her kindly and made her part of itself. Then the two figures faded into mist. From that moment, the lost child was remembered, not as gone, but as changed. Glen Ellis Falls is a real place of thunder, spray, and stone steps, but the legend gives the water a face. On moonlit nights, people imagine a small reflection near the pool, too still to be a wave. Maybe it is only light, but in the White Mountains, even light can feel like someone watching from the old world, waiting until the falls grow quiet. Number 30. The Elderly Residents. Concord, New Hampshire, 1876. The Centennial Home opened on Pleasant Street with a purpose that still feels kind. It was created by local charity to give elderly people, especially those with few resources, a safe and comfortable place to live. At the time, it was one of the early homes of its kind in New Hampshire. The need grew so quickly that the first building was replaced in 1892 by the larger brick structure people know today. For decades, it housed older residents, many of them women, and the place served the community until 1994. After renovation, it became the Centennial Hotel, a boutique inn with turrets, warm rooms, and a polished restaurant. The haunting matches the building's history. Guests and staff have spoken of soft shadows near the entrance, quiet figures by the towers, and the feeling of elderly residents still moving through familiar halls. These are not wild or angry ghosts. They feel settled, as if some people were so grateful for shelter that they never fully left. Its past was not built on battle or crime, but on care. The old home gave people warmth at the end of life, and the hotel still carries that gentleness in its brick and stairways. When a shadow crosses a hallway after dark, it feels less like a warning than a resident taking one more slow walk beneath the old lights at night.
If you enjoy this video, please click the like button.
And don't forget to subscribe to the channel.
See you in the next one.